I'm still reflecting on whether I'm going to continue with these collective videos now that the election is over. There's a strong chance I will see. It would help if you can let me know if you're watching this, and there's a good chance you're not watching it, because the YouTube algorithm initially held my hand and spread my videos, but now it's completely withdrawn, and it seems to now be up to me to spread the word. So I'm going to ask that if you're watching this, please comment, like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff, but especially comment if you feel like it about what resonates, what doesn't, what you get out of anything that I say, so that I can use that information going forward. It's been a while since the election's been over, but I thought I'd do at least a closing video after my 5 videos about hoping that the Democratic Party would wake up. It's waking up, but only after the fact. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I am of two minds about this. I have parts of me that resonate with both sides of the story, and then a part of me that doesn't resonate with either. That's why I wanted Marianne Williamson to be the next president. She appears to be focusing on her spiritual side and talking about much more mystical things right now. I don't blame her. The world has shifted completely over the course of a month or two into a very masculine-oriented, masculine-dominant one, where there's little room for the feminine, but for the past 4 years it's been the opposite. So I understand why this had to happen, but I know for a fact that it's not going to be this way forever, that we're not always going to have to sway from one extreme to the other extreme, and that's what I'm waiting for. When I talk about a spiritual foundation, one of the main pillars of that spiritual foundation is knowing that both sides are a part of one story. We're not there yet. Yeah, we're not there yet. And I mentioned in my last video that Trump's election kind of gives a good view of the next 4 years, obviously. Barring any unexpected surprising changes, the general trajectory seems to be, well, first off, the World War III nuclear war thing that I mentioned astrologically and energetically seems to be well underway. And one of the biggest things that's on our plate as a collective, when I talk about masculine and feminine energies, of course, it's in many ways independent of man versus woman as biological sex, but in some important ways, it is also dependent on man versus woman in a biological sense. The terms masculine and feminine energies and what they stand for and all of that, those are very important topics and complex topics, but also common sense and simple in the end. Those are things that I want to talk about in more detail and in a more dedicated way. So right now I'm just using these terms for people who are already kind of in tune with those ideas. But yeah, so what's on our plate is that the masculine energies are being pushed forth with all of their glory, if you want to call it that, both good and bad parts of them. So what are we expecting? War. We're expecting the most standard or conventional definitions of masculinity to be splayed out into the open for review. The predominant mainstream definitions of masculinity, spoken or unspoken, that have to do with aggression and violence and strength being intertwined with those things. That you're only strong if you're vigilant and on your toes and fearful, really, or if you make others afraid of you. Dominating over something else that's smaller than you. Being able to be destructive. And having power over emotions rather than mastery of them. In other words, being able to override emotions. And all of those things that I'm listing are unhealthy aspects of the masculine, but they are how conventional masculinity is defined to this day. And that's what's on the table. And in the short term, all of this is going to be worked on, as is reflected by Mars retrograde in Leo and in Cancer until May of 2025. But I would assume that this is going to be very heftily worked on in the long term as well. I think that's one of the main things that Trump is a reflection of right now. He is someone that can hold the space for the dissolution of the masculine energies, because it's going to take the acting out and releasing and also having to confront the limitations of the fear-based masculine. And what's needed on the other side, what we need to cultivate and what we need to gain access to, is men being allowed to be vulnerable, men being allowed to have their emotions and know that they have emotions and acknowledge that they have emotions and not be ashamed of their emotions. And all of this is hand in hand with where the feminine is at, because the feminine is the representation of that which the unhealthy masculine is trying to avoid in itself. So to the extent that the masculine energies are avoiding and running away from their own emotions, and when I say masculine energies, it could be a woman as well, but often it is a man. But to the extent that masculine energies are running away from their own emotions, that's the degree to which they're also running away from or shutting down or belittling the feminine energies. I'm going to try to put this into visual form because it's actually very simple. There's a conglomerate of pain, repressed emotion, misery that the unhealthy masculine and the unhealthy feminine are defending against, and we go back and forth only because the actual issue is not addressed yet. And these colossal crises in the form of world wars and our having to confront our existence and our very real prospect of annihilating ourselves with nuclear weapons, these are all expressions of the unconscious forces that we're trying to defend against. So this is going to be very, very pivotal, important work that we're doing, but it's going to be, to say that it's going to keep us on our toes is an understatement. It's going to be the most alive we've felt probably, but also the most scared we've felt. In many different ways. Today, Pete Hegseth was possibly going to be replaced by Ron DeSantis. What I'm saying about masculinity has everything to do with the military, with war, with what Trump wants to do with the military.
If you wanted another general or another admiral or an executive or a CEO or a politician or a lawyer to run the Defense Department, we've tried that before. He said, I want a warfighter. I want lethality, lethality, lethality. I want readiness, accountability, standards, warfighting. Pete, that's you, that's me, clean house.
Versus what the Democrats have been doing, which is more of taking a passive stance and letting everything kind of withdraw. I don't think the world is going to be what it's like right now in 100 or 200 years. All of this is going to be dissolved over time, the idea of war or needing to fight for our survival. So what I expect is that there's going to be a lot of action that's taken by Trump and people who represent what he's doing that end up serving only as reminders to us of what we don't want anymore. But there are a lot of people who are still identified with the need to fight, to be in a constant state of fight or flight, to exist. So that's where the emotional work is going to have to come in. It's going to happen. It's going to happen on its own. We're all going to feel more deeply. We're going to understand more about what we've been tolerating that our bodies are no longer willing to go along with. We're coming into our bodies like never before. To say that we were living a sliver of our existence is an understatement, and we're breaking it all apart. We're going to be the closest thing to full versions of ourselves as spiritual beings in physical bodies. So I look forward to it. So who knows, maybe Marianne Williamson will run again. I think that there's a reason why the US is kind of behind in terms of not having had a woman leader of the country yet. I think we're waiting for these imbalances to resolve. The first female president of the US will probably be a reflection of the healthy feminine that's yet still buried. It's out there in different forms, but it's fragmented and it's not acknowledged. And in many ways, it's underground still. The next 4 years is going to bring us closer to the balance that I'm looking out for, that I'm waiting for. And I do look forward to the process that we're going to go through in the meantime, because it's going to help us get in touch with a sense of existential meaning and purpose as a collective that so far has been far from what our experience is of this world. We've been very dissociated and very disconnected, and this is the only way out of that. But one thing seems to be established in the collective, that the level of dynamism, the speed with which things are changing, the vitality and life force behind all of this change is just nothing like we've seen in my lifetime before. And I think it's only going to get more and more powerful. So I'm looking forward to it, as challenging as it might be. See you in the next one.